Welcome to Matters Financial and Geopolitical from the Frontier. I apologise for my absence, but I was in the UK. I'll tell you about that in a moment. I had a very interesting day yesterday with TransUnion, who are a credit bureau, but actually much more. I describe them as a algorithmic artificial intelligence data business, and I think it's really quite interesting. We've published one interview already, that's with Lee Nike, the CEO of TransUnion Africa, and have a look at his presentation, which was extremely dynamic. It is headlined "Making Smarter Decisions in a Digital Consumer Era," and is well worth reading. Take a look. Macro thoughts. SWIFT shows impact of Iran dispute on international business. Funnily enough, I started off in the back office many years ago in Credit Suisse, and actually at one point was managing the SWIFT component in the operations department, and it's a mid-sized Belgian business that oils the wheels of global finance from a tranquil lakeside southeast of Brussels across the road from a 19th century chateau. But the peaceful existence of the Society for Worldwide Interbank Financial Telecommunication, better known as SWIFT, has been ruptured by a transatlantic battle over the Iran nuclear deal. President Trump's reimposition of nuclear sanctions on Tehran poses a direct challenge to the business model of SWIFT. It builds itself as an internationally available, politically neutral utility. But obviously, in my opinion, it's going to be weaponized against Iran. What do I mean by that? Iran will be cut off from the system, I suspect, and therefore will be unable to transact in US dollars in particular. And the point is, last time round, Iran used gold and other proxy assets in order to transact. It's going to be a little bit more difficult this time round. I think Trump is really going to tighten the screw. And of course, this flips President Obama's oil warfare strategy on its head. We've seen the oil price rise, although I saw yesterday Trump was speaking about wanting to bring it back down again. But basically, Obama brought it down to put pressure on its Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, Russia, and others. And we've seen Trump switch that around and tighten the screws again. One conclusion from trade tensions: the dollar is a likely loser. I think this is from Bloomberg Markets. This is also a view. I mean, I had a target for 94.50 on the dollar index. We hit that level. I'm sidelined now, but the general consensus is a sharpened trade war will affect the dollar. In G20, 41% of GDP is now controlled by populists versus 4% in 2007. The point here is, and you see this in America in particular, the populists are pursuing what I would call, the economy of a very narrow 4-5%. You see that in America in particular, but somehow the man on the street kind of believes that the policies being pursued are in his interests or her interests. And the question for me is, how long will that delusion be maintained? Italian yields spiking again, 2-year up over 40 basis points in 2 days, 10-year up over 30 basis points. So we saw this dramatic move higher. We retraced about half the move, and we're now turning higher again. I was in the UK doing a lot of things, but one of the things I was doing was attending the wedding of my old school friend Alex Michaelis and Susannah. And it was indeed a deep pleasure to attend their wedding. It was very beautiful. It was at Cowley Manor, and it was so wonderful to catch up with old friends from my teenage years: Lynn Futsong Menuhin, Edward Roussel, Alex, of course, Justin Albert, who now runs the National Trust in Wales, and so many more people, and really a great pleasure, people's parents as well. And this is a photograph when I was 17 with Alex and a friend of ours called Din Catherine Jones, who sadly passed away at a very young age a few years ago. This is the photo from NASA of the volcano in Guatemala. Take a look at this scene from the sky. I like this word of World Environment Day, biophilia, a love for empathy for or empathy with the natural world and living systems, especially as a human instinct. And, I particularly feel that this is the essence of mankind and something we've lost, the rich pleasure that comes from being surrounded by living organisms. And I, for one, appreciate them tremendously. To calm myself, I got into upper hill traffic and ended up at the Uhuru Park viewpoint 30 minutes later. This is a photograph taken by M. Vav on Twitter. Have a look, it's really very pretty. What if Lois Lane was never fooled by Superman's shoddy disguise? She just pretended for his sake because the male ego is so fragile. I like that. This is my foster elephant, Enkesha. She was found as a baby with her trunk caught in a snare. The David Sheldrick Wildlife Trust took her in. That's from The Ellen Show. A Virginia man has slurped down 40 dozen oysters to claim victory at this year's World Oyster Eating Championship in New Orleans. And I thought he ate 480 of the bivalves in 8 minutes in Sunday's oyster event. And I thought, I fancy my chances, actually. And this is the Oyster Meister, who is dishing out oysters at Caroline Manor on the occasion of Alex and Susannah's wedding. The gene that led to the human intelligence boom has been found, says the new scientist. This is a photograph of the aftermath of a volcano explosion. The volcano in Guatemala erupted, killing hundreds. Guatemala volcano is such an arresting and powerful photograph. Big news out of Ethiopia, and I'll come to it in detail, but firstly, Parliament has lifted the state of emergency. So that's a big development, and I'll go into it in depth momentarily. Ex-Al-Shabaab leader Mukhtar Ali Robow makes his first trip out of Somalia in more than 13 years. And Ilya Gridnev quips, from jihad to business lounge. Donald Trump Jr. says the economy is most helping forgotten men in forgotten land everywhere between New York City and Malibu in Breitbart News. And I said, actually, the paradox is that it has not, and is simply not designed to achieve that. It's a sugar high. The riddle is, how long will the forgotten men believe? When will the, it reminds me of that Groucho Marx quote, who are you going to believe, me or your lying eyes? And then I came across this, an old couple came to the door stumping for a GOP gubernatorial candidate. They know I'm a retired pastor, so they assumed I was one of them. I finally interrupted and said, just so you know, I'm a Jesus Christian, not a Fox News Christian. Stunned, they walked away speechless. Very interesting report by Cambridge University Research, which I saw through the Times. The global economy is headed for another sharp downturn, triggered by the bursting of the carbon bubble, as cheap renewable energy causes a collapse in demand for fossil fuel. Mass unemployment could lead to political unrest and the rise of populist leaders in countries with big oil and gas industries, the study said. It is predicted that oil companies' vast reserves of fuel would become stranded assets before 2035, having been sharply devalued by the rapid shift to electric cars and wind and solar power. Technological change in the global power generation and transport industries is happening much faster than expected by many industry analysts, it said. meaning fossil fuel prices could collapse suddenly when investors realize what is happening. The collapse could wipe between $1 and $4 trillion off the global economy, according to the study. It noted that the financial crisis of 2008 was triggered by a loss of only $0.25 trillion. The researchers studied the pace of technological change in countries around the world and found that the share of power generation from renewable sources was growing by an average of 8% a year, and the share of hybrid and pure electric vehicle models was rising by at least 10% a year. Jean-Francois Mercure, lead author, said pension funds with significant investments in fossil fuel companies could suffer a sudden loss of value. Individual nations cannot avoid the situation by ignoring the Paris Agreement or burying their heads in coal and tar sands. He said China was poised to gain most from the collapse of fossil fuel prices. China is already a world leader in renewable energy technologies. Took me back to an article a long time ago I wrote in August 2015. I said the end is nigh for crude oil and oil producers from Caracas to Luanda, from Riyadh to Abuja. I was writing about the fall in oil prices at that time. Currency markets, let's take a look. Euro dollar 117.23. It's recovered, but I'll show you a chart in a moment. Dollar index 93.86. Come off that level of 94.50, which was my target. Dollar yen 109.90. Swiss franc 0.9854. The pound has crossed 134, 134.11. The Australian dollar is having a good day, 0.7663, and I'll tell you about that in a second. India rupee 67.065, South Korean won 1068.74, the Rial 380.59, Egyptian pound 17.8975, and the Rand softened markedly after a very poor GDP print. It's at 1274.08. This is a dollar index chart from T Commodity, 93.86 last. I'm sidelined after the 94.50 target was struck, but I should have gone short of that level. Euro dollar, I think, is still headed higher. We're now at let's take a look, 117.22. I think short term will bounce a bit higher, notwithstanding the turn higher in Italian bond yields again. But my eventual target is 114.50. The last time Australia had an economic contraction, Michael Bolton's Time, Love and Tenderness was on the Billboard 100. This is from David Inglis. Investors are bracing for a tough show at Tesla Inc.'s meeting later Tuesday, with bearish bets in the electric car company hovering near a 2-year high. Really, I thought, for one, that some of the tweets Elon's been putting out, the Tesla Kilo tweet and others, are really inappropriate, and I think it's a big mistake, and it's really undermined the share price, which has slid about 17% since the last meeting a year ago. The Daily Beast published an insider's report on persistent problems at Tesla's manufacturing plant, including fires and safety issues. Tesla shares are down as much as 3.4% in yesterday's session. Of course, Elon has plenty of believers who say that despite missing several short-term hurdles, Tesla is well on its way to achieving an exponential production rate. Caution, too, is an oft-repeated mantra. Our view is that the Model 3 production won't happen on a profitable basis until later in 2019. However, as we stated in the past, if the Model 3 hits its targets, the leverage is significant, said lead analyst Rajvindra Gill. I'm bearish about it. Facebook all-time high, Apple all-time high, Amazon all-time high, Netflix all-time high, Nasdaq 100 at an all-time high. That's from Charlie Biletto. This really has been the singular story post the crash of 2008, the outperformance of these big FANG stocks. 20 years ago, Walmart's market cap was 37 times larger than Amazon. 10 years ago, 7 times larger. 5 years ago, 2 times larger. Today, Amazon's market cap is more than 3 times larger than Walmart. If you ever wanted to know what a disruption looks like, there you have it. Netflix net income $671 million. Disney net income $11.5 billion. Netflix market cap $160 billion. Disney market cap $149 billion. Think about that. I'm still bullish on Netflix. A 9,500% stock surge as Chinese companies turn janitors into millionaires. Have a read. It's an interesting article. Gold just below 1,300 at 1298.50. WTI crude oil has had a stronger last 24 hours. We're now at $65.78. Trying to find a base. Outstanding article about the real price of Madagascar's vanilla boom in the Financial Times. In the humid Sava region of northern Madagascar, where vanilla vines grow in the shaded canopy of the jungle, villagers guard their crop as though it were a precious metal. Well they might. Strong demand for natural vanilla, speculation, bad harvests, and money laundering have driven prices as high as silver. Farmers often await to find their vines stripped bare, carried off in the night by gangs of thieves, filling orders for buyers in the far-off capital of Antananarivo, who in turn supply the markets of Western Europe, the US and Asia. In some parts of Sava, say NGOs working in the region, vigilante groups have sprung up to mete out summary justice to the vanilla snatchers. Madagascar supplies 80% of the world's natural vanilla and is in the grip of a vanilla boom. People are saying, I don't care about growing food to feed myself, I only want to grow vanilla. Girls are dropping out of school to marry vanilla barons, and sales of televisions, alcohol and other luxuries are high. People are buying cars and motorbikes that they won't even be able to fill with petrol when the price of vanilla crashes. It's an outstanding long read, well worth reading. Ties into issues around the supply chain, around how multinationals deal with the supply chain. The IMF says, you know the Dutch disease, well I call this the vanilla disease. Read it, it's really worth it. It gives a lot of background to what's going on. Let's move on to emerging markets. The Mexican peso is headed for its lowest level in a year, last trading at 20.4027. Brazil steps up intervention as the real crashes towards a 2-year low, 380.59. I wrote about this on the 14th of May when I said this has all the ingredients for baking a good old-fashioned crisis. Now David Inglis is saying the emerging market stock index just formed a death cross. When that happened back in 2015, stocks went on to fall 30% over the next 7 months. EM currencies have dropped sharply against the dollar, says J.S. Blockland. Look at his chart. Foreign investors pulled $12.3 billion from emerging markets last month, the largest outflow since November 2016. Sub-Saharan Africa, where do the people of Africa migrate to? It's a great infographic from the African Development Bank. Denis Sassou Nguesso has ruled Congo for nearly 40 years. Now his son may try to succeed him. This is huge. Now let's turn to Ethiopia. Ethiopia signals intentions to comply with the 2000 Algiers Agreement and the 2002 Border Commission ruling. The Boundary Commission awarded the contested town of Badme to Eritrea, which Addis refused to accept, leading to years of no war, no peace stalemate. And this goes back to a comment that the Prime Minister made on the 29th of March when he said, it is time, let's build a wall of love between Ethiopia and Eritrea. And he retweeted yesterday and said, I meant it, Isaias. And he really has, I think, wrong-footed everybody. I was tweeting yesterday saying to really disrupt, you have to move at lightning speed. And essentially that's exactly what he's done. And imagine if he makes peace with Eritrea, moves to a more free market model, and lances the political boil all in 12 months. I think that he crowds everyone into Ethiopia bigly. October 2016, I said the government need to change tack and effect a course correction. And I said history shows us that this course correction is one of the most difficult things to pull off. Well, he's certainly pulling it off so far. The EPRDF has made a further decision to sell shares in Ethiopian Airlines and Ethio Telecom. And that is seismic news as well. Plans to privatize state-owned railways, sugar factories, industrial parks, hotels and manufacturing companies are under construction. It signals absolutely just how desperate they are for Forex, but it's a very bold, radical move. Again, wrong-footing absolutely everybody. Admittedly, the top-down infrastructure model has run out of roads. Debt finance is overloaded, need to get more equity on the Ethiopia Inc. balance sheet. And it is a harbinger, I think, for other African countries who are grappling with similar problems. Zambia comes to mind. What is the most dominant payment method in Ethiopia? It's cash, says the World Bank in Ethiopia. And that too is an opportunity for Safaricom to port their M-Pesa into Ethiopia. South Africa's economy shrinks in Q1 as farming slumps, rand falls, GDP contracted by 2.2% in the first quarter, led by a slowdown in agriculture and mining, after expanding 3.1% in the final quarter of last year. This was the largest quarter-on-quarter decline since the first quarter of 2009, when the economy contracted 6.1%. Caught a lot of people off guard. That people were expecting a 0.5% contraction, so much bigger than expected. Adding to evidence that economic growth remained fragile, a survey showed South African private sector activity was at a standstill in May, with an increase in new orders and rising employment offset by a contraction in output. I think it's a buy now on this dip. Purchasing managers' indices show faster expansion in Nigeria, Ghana, Uganda, and Zambia in May, but not in South Africa. Interesting article from BizNews, thrown under a bus, 10 things 400 angry KPMG staffers want South Africa to know. South African all shares down 2.9% in 2018. As I said, the rand weakened and banking stocks tumbled after South Africa's economy shrunk the most in nearly a decade. I think it's a buy. Karen Richards is saying the rand is having another crack at the 200-day moving average at 1273. Actually, we just popped over it to 1274. I think we've got to buy the dip here. Egyptian pound 17.8955. Nigerian all shares down 1.02% this year. It's given up all its gains. It had a very strong start at the beginning of the year. Ghana has now reduced its increase this year to just plus 20.78%, having been up over 30% at one point. Rwanda says mineral export earnings rose to $373 million last year, doubled essentially. Mining is Rwanda's second largest foreign exchange earner after tourism. The East African country took in $166 million from exports of the commodities in 2016. The question is, where are those commodities coming from? Of course, they're coming over the border. Thank you to all of the amazing people I met on my trip who helped to make it so special. That's the Ellen Show when she visited Rwanda. The photo, however, caught a lot of conversation on Twitter. People were saying, who would have thought bare feet Rwandese in this day and age. Lee Naik, the head of TransUnion Africa, said it describes a rock star bank in this little short interview clip that I took from yesterday's event. We'll be producing more content over the next few hours. Nairobi all share bounced yesterday after slumping big time, but it remains 11.573% below its record high set on April 5, but it is up 1.53% year-to-date. Banking stocks and Safaricom firmed up yesterday. NSE 20 is down 10.86%. Billy Owino yesterday, he's the head of TransUnion in Kenya, says the smartphones your customers are holding today are 120 million times more powerful than the computer that guided Apollo 11 to the moon. It's worth thinking about. Look at this advert from the Colonial Times: land for sale in Karen during the colonial days, good prices and little deposit required. That land has gone up so considerably. If you looked at it, it's one of the best returning assets in the last 10 years, and then since then. CDC Group, which acquired a 42% stake in Arm Cement for 14 billion shillings, $140 million. 2 years down the line, the stake is now worth 1 billion shillings, which is $10 million. And it's been a really incredible reverse of ARM. Thanks for stopping by. I'm always grateful.